Good afternoon and welcome back. This is US Home Talk. We are live every Wednesday at noon and on demand at ushometalk.com or everywhere you find your podcasts. We are your hosts, Marcus Walgrave with South Dakota Home Team powered by Hague Realtors, Jason Walgrave with Walgrave Real Estate Group, the Minnesota real estate team at RE/MAX Advantage Plus, and Mike Overson with Luminate Home Loans. We'll be taking all your questions during the show, anything and everything real estate. The call-in number is 612-234-7585, or leave us a message in the comments section on Facebook. Also, we'll be answering questions that we were emailed to us and questions that we'd received on our real estate hotline throughout the week as well. Good afternoon, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
Doing fantastic.
Doing good.
Now, we are going to be talking about an awesome topic, radon mitigation, and we have a great guest in studio with us today, Mike Austad, owner of Dakota Radon Mitigation. Mike, what are you doing on this Wednesday afternoon? Decided to knock out some podcasts with us?
Yeah, trying another concept, Marcus. It's great to be back with you. I know many years we've gone back in different formats through media and radio, and great to be here in sunny Sioux Falls where it's very calm, and aside from some hazy horizon, the sun is shining through.
Yeah, right. As you said, Mike, Dakota Radon Mitigation, the business that you own, services the Sioux Falls area and kind of beyond the Sioux Falls area as well. And so you have been a radon mitigation expert for many years. So you've serviced a lot of my past clients, and they've always had 5-star reviews for you, have been super impressed with the service and the product that you provide them, but just the opportunity to ask an expert questions. Radon's one of those things where it seems like if you're not in real estate, it just doesn't really come up. So, when you do start getting active in real estate, whether it's buying, selling, investing, it may have been a topic that you just simply haven't heard about. And you've always been a good expert. So I'm glad to have you in, and I'm glad to have you on the show to where, we're going to be talking about radon, and you can obviously educate us with anything new going on and simply just help our audience, learn more about it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me back, Marcus, and always love to field questions at any given time. And I've been in the field for quite a while, but as an expert, I appreciate those accolades. That I'm always learning new things, and there's always new structures. There's always new changes in any field, and that's with radon. And as you said, can be a little bit ambiguous for people that have a home and they might get into the sales side of it, sell their house or buy a house, and that's when it becomes front and center. So, yeah, this topic isn't always around the water cooler.
Obviously, Jason being a realtor for over 20 years and Mike processing home loans for as many years as you've been doing it, you guys obviously have had to deal with it, not just through your personal homes that you guys have bought and built and et cetera, but helping your clients kind of navigate those waters too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about radon. I would say at least half of the inspections that we do, the buyers are opting for a radon test. And I think it was maybe 7 or 8 years ago when the law changed in Minnesota that gives buyers the right to do radon testing. Sometimes that law is misunderstood, that a seller has to install a radon mitigation system. But it just simply means you have to give the buyer the ability to do the test. Now, the reality is most of the time, probably 75 or 80% of the time when high radon levels are discovered, the buyer will ask the seller to put in a radon mitigation system and ask the seller to pay for it. 75 to 80% of the time, sellers will agree to do that. The sellers, kind of their perspective is, look, it's not something that we knew about having high radon. We know now, so we're going to have to fix it either with this buyer or the next buyer. And most sellers are they're just taking care of it, and getting it done.
Hey, Mike, for the people listening here, a lot of people, if they haven't bought a house before, they probably have heard of radon, but they probably don't know much about it. Maybe talk about a little bit about what radon is, right? Where does it come from? What possible health effects does it have? And then maybe talk a little bit about what a mitigation system does to address that.
Absolutely. And radon gas, radon mitigation, all those things that are components of that have become more front and center over the last probably 5 to 10 years. Radon is an odorless, colorless gas that exists in various concentrations from the ground, from the earth. And it gets into homes through passages between the ground and the home. And we can't see it or smell it or taste the gas, but its levels can be detected. And over that same time frame, over the years, availability and cost of availability for people, consumers, homeowners, buyers, have been able to be reached more accessibly to get testing done to know if radon is an issue in their house. Radon is a long-term gas exposure problem where the concentrations are at a certain level in the long term. Again, this is not something that will take you out overnight. We don't want to create fear in homeowners that find out they have a high radon level. The long-term effect of radon gas exposure is lung cancer, which is ranked number 2 behind firsthand cigarette smoke. And maybe another classification is ag or industrial exposure, such as farm chemicals or auto body. Long-term day in, day out exposure. So radon gas can affect the non-smoking public, and it is something that is affordably be able to be tested in your home, whether you're selling the home or not. It doesn't matter the age or size or square footage or neighborhood of the home. It's really what is in the ground below the home for radon and its source strength in the ground, and how it can channel through the ground, through the home, whether it be a cracks in the foundation, through drain tile, through leaky fittings or joint fittings or broken up floors or foundation walls. So as it has become more front and center, it's easier to check and correct if there is a radon issue.
Now, Mike, when we kind of talk about some of this information, I think when you talk about it being coming front and center, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't just until recently as well, maybe in the last 10 years, that the EPA has dedicated a month of awareness for radon. And I think that has definitely helped, just to get the general public who isn't in the process of a transaction of buying, selling real estate, to simply get more educated with it. So then you aren't, in a sense, falling into this fearful, like, oh my gosh, what do we do? It's radioactive and it's deadly. Just getting some of that basic information. You got a great website, DakotaRadonMitigation.com. That's DakotaRadonMitigation.com, and that just has some good basic information from there. But even the federal agencies are trying to educate the public more so with radon awareness.
That's absolutely right, Marcus. There is a designated radon awareness / radon action month in January, where there's lots of multimedia releases, whether it be TV, even billboards or magazine and print throughout states, to alert and identify the public of radon, which, as you said, it's a gas that can get into the lung tissue and affect the lungs. And sometimes we don't know until it's too late. But again, we don't want it to be a fear factor, but it has been more front and center over that time period. Also, as we've noticed, and more newsworthy coming out now, is where people are working more from their homes, in their basements. They're looking at or expanding or remodeling their homes for office. We're working from homes. A lot of homeowners have on their own researched and found through their neighbors or through checking or through the real estate transactions in their neighborhood of radon levels, where they just want to get their level checked in their house because people are spending more time at home, especially in the last few years because of that. So yes, there's a lot more media attention out there for it, public and private.
Mike, would you say that the age of the home is that a factor on whether or not there's going to be radon, whether it's a 50 or 60-year-old home compared to a newer home? Does the age of the home play any factor on trying to predict whether or not there's going to be high radon levels?
Well, predicting a high radon house is difficult, and age can be one of those factors. More importantly, with radon mitigation, we can get into this later. We're taking the fight to the ground where radon concentrates, which is in the ground. So what we're trying to do is separate it and take radon from the ground, channel it away from the house through pressure and ventilation and outside where it neutralizes. So an older home could be more of an effect because if the foundation had some cracks or leaks, or maybe perhaps the insulation is weak on the cap or the roof or the sidewalls where the natural forces of weather and wind can create a vacuum effect in the house and pull radon through those cracks of older homes as well. Conversely, newer homes could have the similar issue through drain tile. You know, as we've gone from the 70s and current, more water channeling technology to keep water out of the house as underground drainage. And that the newer homes can have that as an effect to transfer radon in. If there's any predictable forecast of which house may or may not have high radon, that's kind of a crapshoot. That's tough to forecast. It's really the source strength under the home, new or old, and if it does, and how it can get into that home. If that helps a description, you could be on a near a river of an old house that's by granite, and you can think that house is going to have high radon. It's older. There's granite in the area, which is a source of radon, and it might test low. One across the street that could be newer and on a different soil could be through the roof, or to some degree in between and radon.
How often do you recommend testing for radon?
Most of my work is on the mitigation side, correcting homes already tested.
Sure.
The national recommendation is test your home, and then every few years later, test it again.
Okay.
There's no force. I don't believe, again, this is state to state. I'm in the Sioux Empire region, southwest Minnesota, northeast or southeast South Dakota, and then the Iowa area, where we're all in that red zone. If you were to look at a map of high radon concentrations of the U.S., you could Google search that. We are in the so-called red zone, which about 1 in 15 houses or greater are going to predict it to be test high. So we get more media attention here.
Sure.
So that would be more of a reason to test your home every few years.
Okay.
So
Mike, I got
zero there.
Oh, go ahead.
Ground zero in South Dakota, huh? Sioux Falls area.
Yeah, we're glowing. Figuratively.
Right. I remember when radon first became really big. Jason, up here, what was that? Late 2000, maybe early 2010s, when it like really kind of hit the media and it really started coming in. Like every purchase agreement had some sort of, it was radon testing on every single deal. Wasn't it around that time frame?
Yeah, it was about 10 years ago. Yep.
Yeah. And I just remember it was a big topic then. And the knowledge that we have about radon today is much greater. How to its effects, how to deal with it, this and that, versus when it kind of really hit the radar. And some people might be scared of it, right? So you talk about it, it's an odorless, colorless gas. It might cause lung cancer. So it can seem like a scary issue, but over the years, it's just the testing for it and these mitigation systems are so good that it really has seemed to, it's still something we test for and look for, but it isn't like a scare factor from what I can tell through buyers.
Sure.
But Mike, maybe talk about the mitigation systems and how good they are at taking these levels down to almost nothing.
Sure, absolutely. And not to get into arcane language or things, but when you measure a house for radon, it's a PICL or picocurie per liter. It's a concentration of radon to air. That could be another show down the road, which might be interesting too. But So our goal is to get to below 4.0 picocurie per liter average. And don't be surprised if your house is in the 10 or 15 range. That number can go into infinity. So when we attack radon, we want to get to the ground of the house below, such as on the newer houses or those in the 70s and newer have drain tile and a sump basin in a utility room, perhaps. We put a cover that's accessible over that sump basin, over the sump pump, and run ventilation pipe, whether it be 3 or 4 inch diameter, and channel that pipe up and above the roof line in the most direct format we can or cost effective, and get it above the roof line. Maybe it'll be out an exterior wall, it being the vent pipe, or it will go through a garage or an attic or a chase and through the roof above the attic. And then there's a fan assist that's in line with that pipe that's pulling airflow. So if you envision that, you're offsetting the channel, the pressure difference of home and ground, pulling the radon through vent pipe and getting it out and above the structure away from the occupants. And that's really all we're doing. How we do it, how we challenge get the vent pipe tucked away, or what barriers we have to beams or structural things, or away from having it out the front of the house or somewhere in a terrible looking spot. That's the cost variation, and that's one of the key ways of what makes one radon system different than another. But the essentials are there: vent pipe, fan assist, pulling airflow from the ground. If it does not have a sump basin, we would core drill or bore ports into the unfinished area, ideally, of the home, channel air through homes from the ground on homes that don't have drain tile. I don't know if that's clear as mud or making it more muddy.
No, so the if you've got a passive system compared to an active system, I mean, how much more effective is adding that fan feature? And because like we mentioned before the show started, most builders are putting in passive radon systems in new construction right now. But as a homeowner or a buyer, should they be going out and adding that fan to it?
Well, the first important thing we always take back, whether we have an existing passive system or an active system, is to test the radon level first if we're not sure. And there's affordable ways through the homeowner online or at the stores, electronic or non-electronic, between $50 and $200. You can affordably check your radon level. Go from there. If the radon level is elevated a little bit, let's look at your existing system if you have it. In that regard, if everything's connected and there's a vent pipe goes to the sump basin, it's caulked and sealed down, and it goes through actually goes through the roof cap above the roof line and not just stopped under the roof in the attic, there are things to look for to make sure it's actually fully installed and passive. Address those issues and then look to put the fan in, which is your mechanical assist. And that is really the meat and potatoes that's going to take out that radon level if you're having trouble getting a radon level down with a passive or non-fan assisted system. And I have a little fan club with me. As you can tell, it might be quiet in here and because I don't have a whole lot of fans in my club, but this would be like a mechanical electric fan motor that would be in the attic. It's get power to it and run it up and above. This is what's pulling airflow from low to high. And this continuous running fan is one example. Another fan club member, again, I have to pay for these things. They're not real fans of mine, but a smaller one for like a home that has drain tile, it's going to require less effort. You use a different type of fan, but these continuously running fans are your go-getters. And they usually don't take a lot of energy, and that's what's probably going to take your numbers down well.
And how long do those fans typically last?
They do have 5-year warranties. We should get 7 to 10 years out of them. Sometimes the bigger ones don't last quite that long. But any radon installer, and I'll speak from the hat of a radon mitigation field when you get radon mitigation done, the installer should provide some kind of a warranty of fan performance and warranty. If it doesn't work, it should be corrected, or if the fan fails within the 5-year roughly range, it should be covered by some degree of a prorated or full warranty. And they probably take about $4 to $6, $7 a month energy use, continuous energy run.
So that's pretty reasonable. How do you know if the fan stops working? If it's up in the attic, I'm just thinking not many people are climbing up in the attic. So how do you know if it's not working any longer?
Yeah, good question. Installers should include in their installation some degree of a operation monitor system.
Got it.
That shows a gauge, a manometer, if you will, with a U-shaped tube that shows fan vacuum. I might have a picture here of, I don't know if might not be the greatest view. Maybe we could try it.
Yep.
But up there is a little gauge that shows vacuum. So let's pretend that's a U-shaped tube, and that's down in the unfinished cellar of an install. One example of non-drain tile, and this goes in. It's an older home without sump basin, but you look at that gauge and it's offset, and that will show you if the fan's working upstairs where you don't see it or hear it.
Got it.
Offset is good. I think that's always the mistake. Like, you always think you want things level, right? In this case, that's not the situation. You want those two levels to be offset, and that's when you know that the fan is pulling the
It's a
air
fairly
out.
unbalanced world for me, Marcus. And yes, you want an unbalanced U-shaped tube.
So
Mike,
Mike,
go ahead. Sorry,
it's Mike. So let's say you go out to a home, you test it. It's running like around 15.0 for radon levels, and you go and install one of these active systems. What are you seeing generally that number goes down to after an active system is installed and running?
Sure, I can tell you that. And again, from the field of mitigation, as the installers in general, they should offer some form of a guarantee of performance to below 4. So you should at least get to that point.
Do you often see it where it's like all the way down to maybe like 1 or 2 or less than 1?
Yes, that's often the scenario. And homes with drain tile, they require a little less of an attack for greater performance, because that drain tile, or for the listeners that don't eat, breathe, and drink foundation, it's tubing under the ground, under your foundation that feeds into a sump pump basin for water drainage. So we cap that off and make it perform that way. But also, if we tap into that drain tile for radon ventilation, it now is also elongated tentacles of tube of airflow through that drain tile as well. So we can often get victory flags of 1 or 0.8 or 1.3 or better. But sometimes there's other barriers in the house where we don't have that drain tile, or we'll take multiple ports, or we have to drill into the floor. And sometimes you're going to get 2 or 2.4. And also keep in mind, there is a natural radon quantity in just the ambient atmosphere of up to 1.3. So you can't beat that.
Sure.
But that is why it's mitigation. We never get it down to 0, but I think my best was like 0.2.
Oh, wow.
But we can get really good numbers, especially if the home has a sump basin with drain tile, if you will.
Austad, I think that's something that just myself personally, and the clients that I work for, it's always favorable for us to work with somebody like yourself who's been mitigating radon for as long as you have and is certified and things of that nature, because there's moving parts to it, right? I mean, I know with our previous house, it's a ranch walkout. It has drain tiles, a newer build, because the drain tiles required in our market, with new construction. And I had a neighbor who had theirs tested. I think they were like at 2. And I was like, okay, well, they got two. I'm sure I'm somewhere around the four, no big deal. And then I heard another neighbor who was just the backyard neighbor of the one just adjacent to me, and they were 18. I was like, whoa, okay, I should probably get mine tested. So, I reached out to Dakota Radon Mitigation, got some advice on getting it tested. I already moved in. A lot of our clients are getting this testing done during a property inspection, and they had the digital monitors, and so you were able to advise me on where I could get testing done, and my test came back and it was like 22 in my house. And then we just kind of talked about how, and I should have known better because, we've always used the example of Jason and I grew up on a farm, and you look at our parents' farmland, and out of nowhere, you'll see that one patch in the middle of the field that, the crops always dry out the quickest, or there's another patch that's always, a patch that's always wet. And it's just kind of like out of nowhere, there was just that spot. And so, it was one of those situations where it was nice to get you in there, get the system installed and radon out. And then when we built a new home, it was because our new house was a larger house. That's where you came in and said, hey, usually I use this diameter pipe, but because you have, 30% more square feet, I would advise you to go to this type of system. And I didn't even test our new house that we built. I just had you install it. And because it is cost effective to install, especially in the early stages, like new construction. But Jason, I know you see this. If a seller has a system already installed, you can market at that. Say, hey, the radon mitigation system's already in place and it's working. So that's one thing a buyer doesn't have to worry about. That's one thing a buyer doesn't have to worry about installing or having to pay for.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And most of the time, I mean, we're talking 99% of the time, if there's a working radon mitigation system in the house, they won't do a radon test. And whether or not that's a good thing to do or not, that's what buyers are doing. So, because they work, working radon mitigation systems work, and it gives you peace of mind.
Absolutely.
Evan, thank you for getting that map put up. That's pretty, I like to see that because you see it looks like all of North Dakota, all of Iowa, the entire states are red. Looks like about 2/3 of Minnesota is. And South Dakota is about half of it, but Sioux Falls being East River, that whole east side, that's where Sioux Falls is, and I mean that's the red zone. That's zone 1, highest potential.
Yeah, that's not unusual. A lot of research in radon technologies from the EPA was at Ames at Iowa State in the 70s, and Iowa largely due because of a high radon concentration area there. And we're essentially in that same zone. And as Jason, in Minnesota, I believe that there was some new legislation we kind of talked about, well, not new legislation for years, but some of the new construction homes, to my understanding, they do require somewhat of a ventilation or a rough-in, probably been many years now, on new construction in Minnesota homes that that the pipe is already somewhat installed to a rough degree. Is that right? Maybe.
I don't know that it's law, but I think every new construction home that I've looked at in the last few years has had at least a passive system in where, which tells me it probably is law, because builders don't typically put in extra things unless they have to.
Yeah.
They didn't put
it's been the law since 2009.
Has it?
There we go.
Yep.
And just another question I'd throw out there. I do with the billing. I work with closing title companies and buyers and sellers as well. But on the mortgage side of it, Mike, is there certain home mortgages where they want a home checked first for radon?
There's
no
no
call for that.
That's a great question. There's no loan programs that require that to be done. One thing that all loan programs do require is that if there is something in the purchase agreement addressing radon, you have to document that, right? So if the purchase agreement calls for a radon mitigation system to be installed, lots of times We just have to get something in the file showing that it was actually installed, because that was one of the terms of the contract before you could go to closing. So, and that might be, it might be just a letter from the buyer stating that they've seen that the, the radon mitigation system was installed. Could be as simple as that, or any other sort of proof that it was there. But, outside of what the contract says, there's really no requirements, if you will, around radon on the loan side of things.
Sure.
Mike, I know you service our tri-state area, the Southeast, South Dakota, Northwest Iowa, Southwest Minnesota, and one thing I think is a big plus for our homeowners and consumers down here, when they do work for a business like yours, Dakota Radon Mitigation, you have some things in place where, in a sense, you're not testing your own work. You're not doing the electrical work. You're hiring an electrician to do it. You're hiring an unbiased party to test your system that gets installed. And I think that those are some good questions that a consumer, a homeowner should be asking. And I say homeowner too, because it's not just for buyers and sellers. I know that seems to get the most attention during a transaction. But if you have a home, and especially maybe in the last couple of years where you had to get into this home without doing a property inspection, don't hesitate to reach out to an expert like Mike Austad over at Dakota Radon Mitigation. Check out his website, DakotaRadonMitigation.com. Get a free risk assessment and just become more educated.
That's right. There's lots of quality assurance ways to install a radon system, and they do require a power source. So you want to have the electrical done right. And I've been a fan of third-party testing. That is, and this isn't always the case, and it doesn't mean it's bad if it's not done that way, but like in the business of accounting, a separation of duties so that there's not a conflict. But with radon testing, I believe it might be helpful. In some markets, it might not be practical, but again, my work is responding to independent home testing or homeowner administered testing or independent private home inspectors. So I farm out or try to get the farm out of a third party to do the testing. And I really try to shy away from doing initial testing, as it could be a conflict, where the bread and butter of my business is mitigation. So
Sure.
far, not that I would, but far be it from someone to come out with radon monitoring equipment and then with the same equipment coming back high and then selling you mitigation. That can be construed as a conflict. So it's always important to work with home inspection companies and mitigators, and if you can, try to keep that separated duties out.
Jason,
So, Mike,
I know. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, Mike, would that be similar to, like, for example, when I go to get my oil changed, and they do that free inspection, and then they come back and tell me I need new brakes and new struts? Is it similar to that? Because that's how I feel when I'm there.
Well, Jason, as long as we can take out the effects of human nature, everything's fine. What could go wrong? I mean, you go for an $85 pair of wiper blades. What a bargain! I'm not saying that's what you're getting at, or that's the case, or there's certain companies that would dare do that. But you are speaking the language of potential conflicts and padding the ticket. So if there's any consolation, maybe it's a good idea to get an independent test.
Yeah.
And I hate to ramble here, but just to emphasize that testing has become more available. And I get calls from homeowners post-COVID, especially this last 3 years. Not that it's post-COVID, the way things sound like in this time frame, where people are home more and they're buying nice electronic monitors online, or they're going to the store, or they're getting little one-time use non-electronic devices for $20 and mailing these in.
Yep.
And they're coming back with day-by-day data from their Wi-Fi, and they want work done. So they, a lot of homeowners have their own radon testing equipment, and it's good.
Yep.
I think one thing that. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
fellas. I was going to say, Evan, on the radon side, insurance side of things, is there any sort of discounts or anything like that that comes up with radon?
Nope. It's also not something that you can file claims for.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. Well, generally speaking, ongoing health conditions caused by stuff like exposure to things and so on is not a concern for homeowners policies. Also, radiation is a specific exclusion on pretty much all standard form liability policies. So, your insurance company is happy that you're healthy and making payments, but you will not get a discount for having a radon mitigation system.
So let's say you got a system installed and there's damage right in your basement where that system gets beat up where you got to put a new one in. Is it covered to put the new one in?
Sure. I mean, it's a permanent improvement to the home. In the same way that not everyone has a dishwasher, but a dishwasher is a covered appliance if you have one. It's your stuff. You own it. If it's damaged from a insurable event, the insurance company will pay for another install. But excuse me, actual losses from, hey, I think I got lung cancer from radon, your insurance company is going to go, that sucks, man.
Hope it turns out well for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
I hope you have good medical insurance.
Okay. Very interesting.
When we kind of finish up here with radon mitigation, I think one thing you showed that example of the $20 testing, which is obviously super affordable for a lot of individuals, right? You just go to the big box store, you get it, it gives you the directions, lets you know what you need to do. Make sure you follow the directions. That's one of the things where I think some of us like to not read directions and just make it happen. But this is specific. I mean, you gotta make sure you're following the directions, noting day and time, things of that nature, and make sure it's being sealed up properly and before you get sent out. You get that information back, reach out to somebody like Mike Austad, to ask for some more information if your radon does come high. I think one thing I was going to say to you, Jason, was, one thing that is interesting during a property inspection, the property inspectors use electronic testing, and one thing that, again, we want to make sure that we're getting true and honest results and facts. A lot of those electronic monitors, the ones that the property inspectors have, I mean, those are the top of the line testing monitors, and they can tell if somebody had picked up the monitor and moved it, or they can tell maybe if the windows were opened. And so I think that's something to where, if you're as a buyer, you can be a little bit more confident knowing that your testing is being done by one of those units, because they're able to calculate more information than just radon levels.
If I could, Marcus, absolutely. We want to have, especially on a real estate transaction, with the wiper blades example or something of conflicts, or being able to sense things that with human nature into consideration, is those electronic monitors that home inspectors have. They are expensive, and they do have a report with generally an hour by hour graph analysis that now sometimes have temperature, barometer, and movement. So if power might have been accidentally or incidentally cut, or if maybe some windows, maybe people didn't get the directions or showed the barometer and temp drop or increase in a room, there's little flags that show of situations that are suspect or could use further follow-up that are specific to the home inspection radon monitors. And those are very critical on a real estate transaction, to have the right testing equipment, where the box store test units or ones you might get online would not be able to detect those nuances.
Yep.
Well, awesome. Mike Austad, thank you very much for coming on and being our guest, educating us and our audience more about radon mitigation. It's always a pleasure to chat with you about the topic, and I definitely look forward to having you here back in the near future. So thank you, Mike, for coming on.
appreciate being on and being with you again, Marcus and Mike. And nice to meet you, Jason. I know I've been working with your brother for many years, and he's had nothing but accolades for you. So if he told me otherwise, I wouldn't say anything. But
well, just like your fan club, he has to pay for those accolades. So
yeah, you got to pay for them all.
Thanks a lot.
All right,
Thanks for having me.
yes, thanks. Yeah. As our show comes to an end today, we want to thank you all for taking your time to tune in live and for your support of US Home Talk. As always, you can find today's show and all of our past shows on our website, ushometalk.com, or wherever you guys find your podcast. This is Marcus Walgrave, Jason Walgrave, and Mike Overson. Hope you guys have a blessed day.